Hello everybody, it's Tanya and welcome to today's video. This video is going to be a quick review of this book, Dr. Glas by Hjalmar Söderberg. I am sorry if I mispronounce his name, but the pronunciation that I found is Hjalmar. I hope I pronounced it correctly, but correct me if I'm wrong in the comments down below. So yeah, Dr. Glas by Hjalmar Söderberg. This is a short little book, just 143 pages. You can definitely read it in a day, but it will not leave you. Even though it is so short, it packs a lot and it discusses a lot of things. And even though it was written in 1905, it is still relevant even today. It is as brave as people would expect literature to be today, and it discusses the topics and the questions that people are still discussing now, and so it is still very relevant. The novel itself is very reminiscent. It screams Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky, but I would say it's a compressed version of Crime and Punishment. It's Crime and Punishment without the punishment part, in my perception of the novel at least. But it's very reminiscent of Dostoevsky, as well as Thérèse Raquin by Émile Zola. And he actually mentions both of these works in his novel, as well as you will recognize and you will see a lot of Freud in here, like Freudian thought and Freudian psychology in this novel. So it packs a lot, and you can see how educated and how informed the author of the novel was. Hjalmar Söderberg was one of the, as far as I understood, one of the most respected and beloved Swedish authors in the beginning of the 20th century. He started off as a novelist. He has a few novels, and Dr. Glas is considered his masterpiece. But after that he went on to continue writing plays, and then he became a journalist. By the end of his life he was a harsh critic of Nazis, and he died in 1941 in Denmark, in Copenhagen, because he moved from Sweden to Copenhagen later on in his life. So that is the author. The novel is very brave, and it's not surprising that it stirred quite a bit of scandal when it was first published in 1905. After me saying that it's very reminiscent of Crime and Punishment, you can guess kind of the direction the novel takes. What is it about? The main protagonist, Tika Gabriel Glas, so Dr. Glas, lives and works in Stockholm. He works as a physician. He has quite a successful practice. He is well respected in the society, but he is very unhappy. He is very lonely. He is very, you can say, misanthropic. I think he is quite misanthropic actually. And even though he works as a doctor, he works as a physician, he is the last person on earth, the way he puts it himself. He is the last person on earth who should have become a doctor. The way he writes it, he says that what a profession! How can it have come about that out of all possible traits I should have chosen the one which suits me least? A doctor must be one of two things, either philanthropist or else avid for honors. True, I once thought I was both. So yeah, he works in a trade that doesn't suit him at all. He is disgusted by the human body. In his 30 years of life, he has never been with a woman. He is a virgin. Even though he longs for connection, he longs for love, I believe. But his despise for humans and his despise for the body itself doesn't allow him to have it. He is very melancholic, and he is very philosophical. He is very intelligent. He is a very intelligent man. He started this diary to, the way he says, to exercise his soul's wretchedness, if it's wretched, and that's why he promises to write only truth in it. So basically the diary gives you a portrait of a man, a truthful portrait of a man in Stockholm, educated man, very bright man, very philosophical. As a doctor, he of course has to deal with women coming to him, asking to help them whenever they have an unwanted child. He refuses, he always refuses, but not because of his beliefs. He hides behind the screen of the duty. He always refuses because he is afraid of being ostracized by the society. He says that if I help one, then of course more and more and more will come, and the whole city will know. Yeah, purely because of that, not because he believes in that abortions are something bad. The character is very reminiscent of Rodion Raskolnikov without the extreme lack of money, because Dr. Glas is very well off, and without loving and supportive sister and mother, because Dr. Glas is alone in this world. His mother has died, even though she did love him and she was a caring mother, unlike his dad, who was quite angry, quite strict, and he mentions a few times how his dad would beat him, sometimes deservingly and sometimes not deservingly. And so we have this very bright and educated man, isolated from everybody by his own disdain for people and by his own disgust for people, but at the same time being conflicted with his feelings because he longs for connection. There is another character, which is a clergyman, who is an elderly clergyman, whom our protagonist has taken a dislike of from the moment he first saw him. He first saw him as a child in a church preaching. The clergyman is a pastor, and from the very first moment he saw him, Dr. Glas practically hated him. He doesn't mention any reason. There is no particular reason why he hates it. He actually compares the situation to an anecdote about Schopenhauer, when Schopenhauer was sitting in a coffee shop and he sees a man entering the coffee shop, and he just took a dislike of the man and he beat him up just on the reason that he didn't like his appearance. So it's pretty much the same feeling for Dr. Glas disliking Pastor Gregorus, I think his name. Dr. Gregorus has a pretty wife, a very young, pretty young lady who once comes to Dr. Glas asking for assistance. She says that her husband is very oppressive and very annoying in his sexual wishes. Despite being elderly, despite being a pastor, he is very fond of sex, and he is always demanding it from his young, beautiful wife. But of course, since he is a pastor, since he is a church man, calling it a pleasure, it's not what he would call it. He calls it a duty. Hiding behind his religion, kind of hiding behind the screen of his faith, he calls his indulgence, this annoying indulgence that he is constantly demanding from his wife, he calls it a duty. She is of course disgusted by him. She hates her husband. She is actually in love with a different man, and she upfront and honestly confesses about it to Dr. Glas, which took him aback. He didn't expect it from her, but she said, you know, I want you to know, I want you to see me for who I am. And so she honestly and straightforwardly confesses to him that she's actually in love with another man. And she asks Dr. Glas to help her. She asks Dr. Glas to tell her husband that she has got an infection of her womb, and ask him to not touch her because it would be dangerous for the pastor himself. That of course doesn't work. The pastor cannot really contain himself, and he practically rapes his wife. But by that time, Dr. Glas himself becomes obsessed with this young woman. Her name is Helga. He becomes obsessed with her in a sense that he kind of falls in love with her, but also he does understand that it's impossible. This woman will never be his. And despite that, he still is obsessively willing to help her. At this moment, two feelings came together: his disgust for the pastor and his love for this young woman. And that's when the question arises, the question of murder, and if murder can be justified. This discussion of murder starts from afar. He starts thinking about death and killing first from, very divergent topics, where it isn't as easy to tell what is right and what is wrong. He starts from thinking about euthanasia, and he starts thinking from abortion. These are two, even in our days, these are two very polarizing topics, and for people it's hard to unanimously decide what is right and what is wrong to do in these two things. From the point of view of Dr. Glas, from the examples that he gives in life, you can tell that he is in favor of both of these things, because they relieve the burden of life. And so, thinking from this perspective of relieving the burden of life, he starts thinking about a murder, that a murder can also relieve a burden of someone else's life, in this case, in case of Helga's life. And yeah, that's when the question of murder arises. He also discusses many difficult topics in his diary, but in a very concise and in a very short way, which I think is preferable for a modern reader. He talks about goal of human life, for example, which was very interesting. He discusses it with his friends. So it's not really like his thoughts, but he writes them down in his diary, so I guess they do resonate with him. The discussion that his friends had about purpose of human life and what people are seeking. He also talks a little bit about religion. There was a conversation about wine in church, communion wine, whether it should be administered to people just out of the glass, or if it should be administered in capsules, in order to avoid infection. So and it was a discussion that the society had at that time in Sweden. So you get a picture of Swedish society of the period and the questions that they were discussing, the things that they were thinking about. You also get a view of Stockholm and how beautiful it is, because our character, he constantly walks in Stockholm, he looks at sunsets, he looks at the streets, he always talks about the city, that it's a very beautiful city, and how he doesn't want to live anywhere else, because people would normally say that the country is beautiful, but he talks about it very sarcastically. He's like, they talk like that because they paid money to go to the country. Of course they will say that it's beautiful, but actually it's ugly. And he finds Stockholm to be a very beautiful city. He says that if he ever has a holiday, he doesn't want to leave the city. So you get this sense of Stockholm of the beginning of the 20th century. You get the sense of the society and the questions that were raised in society at that time. The novel is very concise. His feelings and his observations are always very concise. By the end, he becomes a little bit more feverish, he becomes a little bit more and more obsessed, and he is not thinking so much anymore, he is more acting on an impulse. The thing with this man, I had this feeling that he was bored out of his wits. He hates his job, he hates people, he has no connection with anybody really. His friends are not that close to him, and I had a feeling that he just really is bored. And he even mentions in his diary that what he wants is action. He wants action. He had a very interesting part in the diary when it was like kind of two sides of him discussing the murder, pro and against. And so the side of him that was speaking in favor of the murder, it mentioned that I want action, I want to do something, I want to feel something, as well as he also mentions that people actually, what human soul is most afraid of is vacuum. What human soul most afraid of is not producing any type of feeling in people around you. It was actually really well written. Let me read it to you. It's a very good quote. This is the quote. We want to be loved, failing that, admired, failing that, feared, failing that, hated and despised. At all costs, we want to stir up some sort of feelings in others. Our soul abhors a vacuum. At all costs, it longs for contact. So yeah, this is the man, lonely, depressed, upset, disconnected, living pretty much in a vacuum by himself, wanting to escape it, wanting to experience some sort of emotion, wanting to stir some sort of emotion in others, wanting to experience movement and life and energy and action. That's what he is longing for, and he is so empty of all of it. And then the question of murder arises, and then there are all the moral discussions of the time. So the book is actually very fascinating to read, and it's so easy to read. You fly through it, you cannot stop. So I definitely recommend picking up Dr. Glas. You will enjoy the atmosphere of Stockholm of the beginning of the 20th century. You will find yourself debating with Dr. Glas on the topics that he is thinking about. You will find yourself contemplating about himself as a person, as like what kind of person would think such a thing, what kind of person would even consider murdering someone else. Yeah, you start thinking about it, and actually it's not surprising, it wasn't surprising for me that by the end of his life he started to get into questions of theology. He started coming to religion, and he started looking for answers as well there, and he started looking for God as well there. So it wasn't really surprising for me reading this book, because I feel like the question of God and absence of God in human life and absence of love in a human life, like what can it produce and what it can do to a person. I feel like it's a very important and significant book. So I definitely recommend it to you. But do try to argue with him. Do try to challenge him, and do try to find a different approach to the questions that he is thinking and to the answers that he is finding, because like I said, he is a misanthrope, and I feel like we shouldn't be that. We should support life, we should support love. So yeah, definitely a great book, highly recommended. I can understand why people call it his masterpiece. I wonder if other of his novels are translated. I would also really love to read them, because what I read about him, apparently all of his novels are like kind of in Stockholm, and people are walking around Stockholm, and I feel like it's a very, I have been to Stockholm once, many years ago, and I remember very shortly, very briefly, for like a few, maybe 1 day or 2 days, and I remember really loving that city. It was very beautiful, and now reading the book set in Stockholm with all of like Stockholm atmosphere and kind of surroundings, it was really enjoyable and interesting. And all the discussions here, like they still do exist in our day and age. So yeah, definitely relevant and highly recommended. So yeah, Dr. Glas by Hjalmar Söderberg. I hope you give it a try. It's a very short little book. You will read it in a day, but you will not regret it. Maybe if Crime and Punishment wasn't your cup of tea, maybe for some, because I saw a lot of comments that people write that like Crime and Punishment is too draggy, it's too long. Many people kind of find it boring. I guess this book, it's not exactly Crime and Punishment, because it's mostly about like kind of, you know, questions of murder. There isn't this punishment part to it, which I feel is very important in Crime and Punishment, and there isn't kind of that strong religious aspect to it, which again is very important in Crime and Punishment. This is more it's like a civil novel. This is more there isn't really like much discussion of religion and presence of God in human life and importance of like love and God in human life. There isn't all of that here. It could be a first step before you getting to Crime and Punishment or something like that, because it is very reminiscent, it is very similar, just like Therese Raquin, also very similar to Therese Raquin. So yeah, highly recommended. I really loved it, enjoyed it. For sure will be coming back to it. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. A small announcement that I would like to make is that I have started a new channel. You will ask me like, Tanya, you barely make any videos on this channel, why have you started another one? I have a reason for that. I have a reason for that. These days I spend a lot of time learning Japanese, because my husband and I, we have decided at least one person in our family needs to know Japanese. So I spent a lot of my free time learning Japanese, and I thought, since I'm sitting and learning anyway, it wouldn't be a bad idea to start a Study With Me channel. If you want some productivity boost, if you want kind of just unobtrusive, quiet, just a kind of background video for your reading or for your studying or for your work, maybe for your cleaning the house, or you know, whatever else you might be doing. If you need a background video with some views of Tokyo and a person sitting and studying, then yeah, check my new channel out. A first video will be linked down below in the description box. My plan is to upload 4 times a week, which will be 2 different views of Tokyo, but one video will be with music background, like jazz, quiet piano, some fire crackling or maybe rain sound, and a second version of the same video would be no music, just maybe fire crackling or just rain sound, and then a second view of Tokyo. Again, 2 versions. So my plan is like that. Maybe it will be just 1 view of Tokyo a week, but yeah, at least 1 view of Tokyo per week you can expect, because I sit and study anyway, and I feel like, you know, maybe somebody wants to study together, read together, or do something else together, and just wants a quiet, pleasant background. So yeah, if you want something like that, check out the video. It will be down below in the description. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. I hope you will give Dr. Glas a try, and then let me know what you thought about this book. If you have already read it, please let me know what you thought about it and your opinion on Dr. Glas, your just feelings in general about this book. If you know any other translations of Hjalmar Söderberg's novels in English, please do recommend them to me. Let me know what other novels by him you like and admire. And for now, that's it. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you're having a very good day. I hope you're staying safe, reading good books and enjoying them, and I will see you soon in my next videos. I hope to be more active on this channel from now on, because I kind of feel more energy. I don't know what happened, but I kind of feel more energy, so I think I will be able to make more videos on this channel as well. Wish me luck. Wish me luck. Yeah, stay safe. I hope everything is well, and I will see you soon in my next videos. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.